Howdy everybody, welcome back to the channel, and long time no see. It's been quite a while since this ugly mug showed up on my channel, right? I've not really had a whole lot of time to sit down and play Call of the Wild lately. I've been very busy, so I figured why not do something Call of the Wild related, but also takes up just a little bit less time, something simple for today. I'm going to rank all of these maps from S tier to D tier. Now I am going to rename these because I think it's appropriate. My S tier is going to be Great One, and then there's going to be like Diamond, Silver, or Diamond, Gold, Silver, and Bronze, appropriately. But all of these, I want to preface before we get started, these are just my opinions. This is not the end-all, be-all. I encourage you to share your opinions in the comments below because I love to hear from you. I would love to talk about your preferences and discuss some things about the reserves that maybe you would like to change, some things about the reserves that I would like to change. I want to talk about your favorites. I want to talk about my favorites. I want to talk about what you like about these reserves. I want to talk about what I like about these reserves. I want to encourage debate and conversation, not just because the game is fun and is enjoyed by so many people who want to see this game do good and have enjoyed it over several years, but maybe with a little bit of critical thinking, a little bit of civil debate. Maybe the devs one day may see this and take some things into consideration going forward into the development of the game. At least that's what I would like to see. So that's the goal for today. I'm going to change up the names of these tiers, and we are going to jump right in. One more thing before we get started. I would also like to just say this ahead of time. I do not believe any of these reserves are inherently bad. There is no such thing as a bad reserve in this map. They all have fun or redeeming qualities about them. These are just my preferences, and we're going to go off of some, certain nuances. I'm going to talk about how easy it is for beginners. That's going to be a really big focus for me, is how easy it would be, or how easy it would be for me to recommend these reserves to people who have just started playing. I'm going to take into consideration how easy it is to traverse through the map. I'm going to take into consideration, map design, foliage. A lot of the player base likes to hunt drink zones, and I mean that's the primary way to grind out great ones, aside from pheasant or tar, that kind of thing. So there's a lot that I'm going to consider and a lot that I'm going to talk about when I rank these maps. So sometimes we'll agree, I'm sure, sometimes we'll disagree, and that's perfectly fine. I, again, encourage civil conversation and civil debate in my comment section. I will also, if you would like to, I'm going to leave the link for this tier list in the description if you would like to make one of these for yourself. So, that being said, let's go ahead and put Layton Lake where it rightfully deserves. I think I would put Layton Lake in Diamond. I'm not gonna put one in Great One just yet. I think we all know what my Great One's gonna be, but I'm only allowed to have one. That's my one rule when I do these by myself. I have one. It allows me to think critically and a little more in depth about my choices when I do it this way. And Layton Lake, while it is one of my more favorite maps, it's definitely not my Great One. I feel like Layton Lake is the perfect tutorial map, a perfect starter map. If it wasn't Layton, I would definitely say this about Verhonga or Silver Ridge Peaks. I feel like those three maps are very, very, very good for beginners. Layton Lake is not super crowded. It's not a very big map. It's sizable, but it's not the biggest. For example, when you compare it to Medved is a big old map, right? Very ambitious size. And the animal population on the map doesn't make you feel crowded, and it's also not boring. Sometimes you can go for a little while without seeing anything or hearing anything, but that's usually user error. That's not because it's not populated enough. But it's also never too busy. It doesn't feel like it's just, bam, animals in your face all the time, no matter where you are. And I like that. Sometimes you want a chill experience when you play Call of the Wild, and Layton Lake is a really good starting point for new players, but it's also a really good, chill out kind of map for experienced players who don't want anything too high stress or too difficult. And again, I really like the way the map is built. There's very little places in Layton Lake that's truly difficult to get to or difficult to move through. I don't think I'd grind Great Ones necessarily on it unless I absolutely had to. If there was a Great One exclusive to Layton Lake, that's when I would do it, but I would not recommend Layton Lake for Great One grinding. Unfortunately, there are just better maps to do that on for these animals. Other than that, those are my thoughts on Layton Lake. I think it rightfully deserves a spot at the top. It's the OG. It's fun. It's chill. It's not difficult. It's a good starting point. Layton Lake deserves its flowers. I said I wouldn't go on these super long tangents, but here I go about Layton Lake. Anyway, We're going to move on to Hirschfelden. I think it's a good challenge for starter players. I don't think people who have just started playing should rush immediately to Hirschfelden. I think that, like, once you get your bearing, you have played long enough to know what you're doing. You've got the general controls down, the general gist, what you have to do, the mechanics. And then I think Hirschfelden would be a good challenge for beginner players. Maybe players between the levels of maybe 10 to 15 should start on Hirschfelden around that time if you're new. I feel like Hirschfelden has a lot of foliage, and it often gets in the way of your targets. I already have trouble seeing. My visibility is already an issue for me, and oftentimes I spook a lot of animals going through Hirschfelden without even realizing how close I am to them, or I've made a step and made too much noise because there's just so much foliage, even when I'm crouched, not even when I'm up and running. There is a lot of flat open land, which makes, like, I don't know, feed times and rest times really accessible to hunt, but a majority of players don't do that unless they absolutely have to. For example, Himalayan tahr or mountain goat, they don't have drink times. They have to hunt rest zones or have to hunt feed times. But on Hirschfelden, you don't really have to do that unless you're going after, like, ringneck pheasant, if I'm not mistaken. That or the European hare. It's not the best beginner map. There's some tricky parts to Hirschfelden. It's a little more difficult to traverse than Leighton, but not by much. Overall, their drink zones are not as wide open as Leighton Lake. Hunting drink zones on Hirschfelden are not necessarily the most difficult thing that you can do on Hirschfelden. It's not the most difficult map to play on by any means, by any stretch. It's a good map, and it has a good variety of animals that vastly differ from Leighton Lake. For example, red deer. I've always loved red deer. There's fallow deer, there's roe deer, there's pheasant, there's red fox, there's bison on that map, European hare, there's geese on that map. It's a great map for geese. Absolutely 100%. Like, if not the best, then one of the best maps for Canada geese. So if that's your thing, I do recommend Hirschfelden. I think it's a good opportunity for players to learn about goose hunting, bird hunting mechanics. When they get started, I'll say that. I think I'd put Hirschfelden in gold. I don't particularly love Hirschfelden, but I really like it. It's a good challenge map, especially when you're done with the mundane and the monotony of Leighton Lake. You move on to Hirschfelden, especially when you don't really have any other DLC. Now, this is probably what's going to get me vilified. We're moving on to Medved Taiga. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I'm sorry, I don't like Medved. I feel like they were a little too ambitious with the map size of Medved. I don't feel like what you get out of this map is worth the price you pay for Medved, or at least the price you paid when it came out for Medved. It's not the same price now, I don't believe, but correct me if I'm wrong, please. I think the map is far too big, but also far too empty. I think for a map that size, they need to be backfilling more and more animals, or be putting in more and more animals. As big as Medved is, it does not feel like a busy map at all. And in fact, you go for a long time without seeing really anything. And it's really easy to just walk up on animals and then they spook, and you never really see what you spook, other than, like, you hear a call and you realize what animal you've spooked, but by the time you figure all that out, it's already gone. Medved is particularly difficult to traverse in some places, especially like the mountainy regions. I will say that a lot of the ice out on Medved, as you're walking out on the ice, on that frozen water, is glitchy and buggy, and you fall through the floor. It's even with four-wheelers. I've seen four-wheelers glitch out on the ice and explode, and I think that's an issue. I don't know if they've patched that yet. I don't particularly like to play on Medved. I do semi-often, kind of often, it just depends, but I don't go back to Medved very often. Very rarely do I play it. I like the animal variety on Medved. I just wish there were more animals on that map, more species to pick from. I know they added capercaillie and gray wolf as backfill species, but I don't feel like that's enough. I really don't feel like that's enough. You've got your caribou, you've got your lynx, your boar, your moose. It's a great map for moose, especially great one grinding moose. Like I said, every map has its redeeming qualities, but I don't think that Medved is my favorite map by any stretch. Very far from it, and I definitely wouldn't recommend it to a beginner. I would not throw a new player out on Medved. It is like the easiest way for a brand new player to get frustrated and get bored with the game if you recommend them to start on Medved of all places, unfortunately. And that's just how I feel. It's not a bad map. There's no such thing as a terrible map. It's just not a map for me. Moving on to Verhonga. That's an instantaneous diamond for me. Verhonga is goated. Verhonga, for a really long time, was my favorite map. I think it's great for beginners. It's pretty wide open. There's nothing really holding you back. You can move across the map very easily, especially with a four-wheeler. I think the species variety is a vastly different change of pace, especially to someone who maybe bought Verhonga as their first DLC. I know Verhonga has been around for a very, very, very long time in Call of the Wild. It's one of the very first DLCs. It's not the first, but one of them. And it was a completely different change of pace when it was launched. I mean, you've got Kudu, you've got Gemsbok, Springbok, you've got Wildebeest, you have Lions, there's Scrub Hare. They just backfilled, well, not just, but they backfilled Eurasian. It was Eurasian Widgeon on that map as well. There's Cape Buffalo on this map. There's Warthog. I mean, there's just everything to love about Verhonga. I love, love, love the animals on this map. I wish that they would go in and remodel the lions. I know they remodeled a lot of pre-existing species when ASCII Ridge was announced and released, which, thank you, they look amazing. It's been a much-needed change, but now it's time for the lions to get some treatment. It's time for the kudu. It's time for the springbok. It's time for the wildebeest. They all need a little bit of that love that the bighorn sheep, the pronghorn, the gray wolves, the mule deer got when ASCII Ridge dropped. And maybe just between us, it wouldn't hurt to tweak the Gemsbok and the blue wildebeest scoring. I fear that blue wildebeest are scoring diamond too frequently, and I feel like Gemsbok are not scoring diamond enough, but that's also just my personal belief. Anyways, moving on to Parque Fernando. I don't really spend a lot of time on Parque Fernando anymore. I used to when I played on console. I was on Parque Fernando all the time, especially when the Axis deer were buggy. That was a grand old time. Parque is a great map to play with friends. It's not really a beginner-friendly map. It's intermediate at best. I would probably introduce a new player to Parque Fernando around the same time they'd be ready for Hirschfelden. It's not terribly difficult. It's pretty easy to walk around and traverse. It's easy to get around on a four-wheeler in Parque Fernando. I like the animal choice as well. There's a pretty nice spread there. There's red deer, axis deer, black buck. There's puma, mountain lion, cougar, whichever you want to call it. There's cinnamon teal, I'm pretty sure. There's water buffalo. I'm sure I'm missing one or two species, maybe. But, I mean, overall, it's fun for like an hour. That's my problem I run into nowadays. I get bored of Parque Fernando really easy, and a lot of the open drinking areas are not super accessible, I fear. I think there's plenty of coverage for you to duck down in and cover to reduce your visibility when you're at these zones, but there's also just a lot of easy ways to spook animals or run up on your animals, or like the target that you're looking for is lost in a sea of foliage and then they get away, that kind of thing. But also, again, my visibility suffers anyways. I can't see very well anyways, so that could just be a skill issue on my part. But that's how I feel about Parque, and I think for that reason, I'm going to put Parque in gold. I think that's fair. I think that's more than fair. Moving on to the goat of all goats, the Don Julio of Call of the Wild reserves, man. Yukon freaking Valley. This map is absolutely, if you didn't already know, this map is my one great one. I do not have hardly anything to say about Yukon Valley except for the caribou. And again, that's a whole other can of worms. It's not entirely 100% tied to Yukon Valley at all, really. I love Yukon Valley. I love the rich landscapes. I love that, like, no 2 or 3 areas of the map look entirely the same at all. I love the even ratio of really high highs and really low lows, like valleys and hills and mountains. I love the open water sources that make it really, really easy to hunt at. I don't know. I could go on about Yukon Valley forever. I don't think that Yukon is necessarily the most beginner-friendly map. I think that if a new player was going on a guided hunt, it would be a lot better that way, I think, on Yukon Valley. And I mean, I'm talking pre-level 15. That's what I mean by beginner. I don't think Yukon is the best beginner map, but I could see in certain circumstances where a beginner could go on Yukon Valley and be very successful. I mean, there's moose, there's bison, there's gray wolves, my favorite, there's Canada geese, There's caribou. There's grizzly bear. So there's a lot of great big animals that have very big organs that make it really easy to hunt. You know, I don't know. I don't think I'd immediately throw a beginner on Yukon, but I think with a guide, it would be a lot of fun for a new player. Another thing to note, too, this is just my own personal anecdote. I hate night hunting. I'm awful at night hunting. I'm impatient. I can't really see, yet again. But when it comes to Yukon Valley, I could night hunt Yukon Valley for hours and not get bored. And that's not just because gray wolves' drink time on Yukon Valley is during the nighttime. It is just so much fun to walk around the map and hunt from literally dawn to dusk and through the night. I could do that on Yukon for hours. I could never get tired of Yukon. I always have a good time on Yukon. I think that Yukon deserves not just its flowers, it deserves the crown. Moving on now, we're going to go into Cuatro Colinas. I don't know. I kind of have the same problem with Cuatro that I do with Parque Fernando. I get bored really easy of Cuatro Colinas. I don't really go back to Cuatro all that often, and I feel that I need to, because of course I want 1 diamond of every species, and so I will have to go back at some point, but I've been putting it off because I don't vibe with Cuatro. I get really bored. I don't think it's the most difficult map to traverse, but I would not take a 4-wheeler on this map in certain places. Cuatro is, I think, best played with like tripods or stands of some kind. Blinds even, because in a lot of different places there's just not really any foliage or any coverage for you to duck down in. There are a lot of different and interesting animals on Cuatro Colinas, such as the Iberian wolf. I mean, I'm partial to wolves. There's tons of different ibex and mouflon. It's very big for, you know, mountain hunting, sheep hunting especially. There's roe deer. I think there's a boar species on that map now. There's, I think, hare? I could be wrong. I think there's a rabbit species on that map. Yes, there is. There are rabbits on that map. There's red deer. I don't know if I mentioned red deer yet, but there's red deer on Cuatro, I'm pretty sure, as well. So there's not a really big variety of, like, big game, per se, but it's a good small to mid-sized game map. And so if that's something you're into, I could recommend Cuatro to somebody. If you're new, I don't see why not. I don't see why Cuatro wouldn't be beginner friendly, but I also would understand how it could be difficult learning how to take down very small prey or smaller prey. For example, roe deer are very small. They're very small. Rabbits, very small. Boar, small. The mouflon even, I think they're only a class 4 or 5 depending on the mouflon or the ibex. I think a new player could probably find difficulty adjusting to game of that size after starting somewhere like Layton. You know what I mean? So I think it's a good intermediate map for someone that's like used to the mechanics at that point. And for that reason, I don't know, man. I just don't vibe with Cuatro, really. I think I'm going to put it in silver. Moving on now, we're going to talk about Silver Ridge Peaks. I'm going to go ahead and cut to the chase. Silver Ridge Peaks, if it wasn't for Yukon, it would probably be up there. It would probably be my Great One section. I think Silver Ridge is not just a great beginner map, because it is so easy to traverse, even with the mountainous regions and a lot of like foliage that gets in your face, a lot of, like along the sides of the hills and mountains and everything. It's so easy to hunt drink zones. It's very, very, very easy to hunt drink zones. And I also feel that it's a very good introductory map for players who want to grind out their first Great One. For example, Black Bear. And as you know, I don't have to tell you, but Black Bear grinding for Great Ones is a lot different than grinding out herd animals for Great Ones. And I feel like on Silver Ridge Peaks, it would be so easy for players to grind out their very first Great One by grinding out Black Bear. On this map, Silver Ridge makes grinding very, very seamless. I think that there's a little, like very, very small difficulty getting from place to place. Or I should say like lake to lake, for example. I think there's a little bit of difficulty depending, but there's so many different outposts close together, you know, in certain places that I think it makes up for that. I think there's so many different fast travel locations on the map that make traversing the hills and the mountains of the Rockies very, very easy. Very easy. I don't think I'd take a 4-wheeler. It depends, I think, actually. I don't know. I think I'd have to sit and think about that. I think, like, taking a 4-wheeler like at the lower half of the map would probably be easier, but I definitely wouldn't take a four-wheeler at like towards like the top of the map and areas towards the middle and top of the map. I also think the animal variety on Silver Ridge Peaks would be very easy and accessible to beginner players. For example, black bear and Rocky Mountain elk, they're the two biggest animals, I'm pretty sure, on Silver Ridge Peaks, other than bison, and I mean, their organs are ginormous. They're very difficult to miss, unless you're doing something wrong. And there's plenty of smaller game, like there's pronghorn and mule deer especially. There's turkey, there's puma, cougar, mountain lion on this map as well. So there's definitely different varieties of difficulty on this map that a beginner could really get used to. I think it could. This map could really help new players, brand new players, really find their footing here. If Layton wasn't the chosen tutorial map, I think Silver Ridge Peaks would have been the perfect tutorial map. Next on the agenda is Te Awaroa. I feel some kind of way about Te Awaroa. I did my very first completely documented grind for a diamond red deer on Te Awaroa. And I did it for my channel, and this was years ago. But that's the only diamond red deer that I've ever found. And I had quite a time on it, but I was also very new to grinding. And Te Awaroa is not a great beginner map at all. It's definitely an intermediate map, especially because it's harder to walk around the map or take a four-wheeler around the map. The drinking zones, I guess, the water sources, hunting drinking zones, is easy in a few places. It's not necessarily the most difficult in a lot of the map, but it depends on what you're looking for. Not to mention, like, there's red deer great ones and there's tar great ones now, and this would be a really good introduction to someone who is not used to grinding feed zones. I will say that. If they want a great one tar, or if they want to go out of their way to find chamois, for example, as well, they don't have drink zones. They would have to hunt those feed zones. And so this would be a really good way for an intermediate player to get into the ropes of hunting feed zones. It's just very hard to walk up and down a lot of the mountain ranges and hills in this map. The foliage provides a lot of coverage around certain parts of the map, but I also feel it gets in the way a lot of the time, especially with the smaller animals like the mountain goat and the chamois. I don't necessarily dislike this map. I think it's cool. I like the animal variety on it. I like the grinding opportunities on this map. For example, there's also fallow deer, great ones. You can grind out fallow deer. Te Awaroa is the place to do it. Overall, I think I'm willing to put Te Awaroa in gold. I think. I don't know. Yeah, I think I'm willing to live with that. I'm not super in love with Te Awaroa, but I also don't think ill of it. I think it's a good challenge map. I'll put it at that. It's a good map that is meant to test you. Up next, yet another map that is built to test you, Rancho del Arroyo. I will say I've not spent a crap load of time on this map. It's not my most favorable map, but it's also, yet again, one of those maps that are just, I feel, meant to test you. They're meant to test your patience. I think I'd feel comfortable with throwing a brand new player on this map, but not without help. I think this is one of those maps that if you're new to the game, again, pre-level 15, I think you would need a guide. I also feel like because of my own problems with my own vision, I lose a lot of targets, especially out in like the deserty region, the dry region. I lose a lot of targets because I can't see them, especially like the lynx, or they're bobcats here. They're Mexican bobcats here. I lose a lot of the bobcats and coyote and jackrabbits, especially in that like really dry part of the map. But there's also a lot of, like, a good portion of the map that is just lush and green, and you have a lot of like coverage so you can hide. The drink zones on this map are kind of difficult to get to and navigate, in my opinion. I feel like it's really bumpy. It's really easy to like get stuck and like fall into the water there. I think it's easy to walk up on animals because the drink zones on Rancho del Arroyo are very like, they're shaped like a dinosaur chicken nugget, if that makes sense. There's a lot of like bends and curves. Well, a lot of those bends and curves on those lakes are like elevated, so you won't know something's there until you get to the top, and by the time you see them, they're already fleeing. The map is not super big. I think I like the size of Rancho del Arroyo, but with the animal populations that are on it, I think sometimes it can be just a little bit much. I don't know. There's not a lot of zone overlap. There's really not. Maybe other than like mule deer and bighorn, sometimes they'll overlap, and sometimes even whitetail. But there's always something moving on Rancho del Arroyo. There's always something around you. But I also feel like maybe Rancho could have been just a tad bit bigger, a little thicker, a little wider, just to make up for at least the difficulty of getting to those lakes to get those drink zones. As far as I know, there's not any big game on Rancho. I know there's mule deer, pronghorn, whitetail, there's jackrabbit, there's turkey, coyote, there's collared peccary. I can't believe I don't remember the species list for this map. Hang on. Yes, I left out ring-necked pheasant. I left out bighorn sheep. So I've covered all of them after that. So there's no big game on this map, which makes total sense. It adds to the realism and immersion of the game. But I think if I'm going to put Rancho anywhere, I think I'm going to put it... Dude, this sucks. This is difficult. I think I'm going to put it in silver, unfortunately. Because I don't love it. It's not my favorite map. I don't hate it. It's not my least favorite. I feel kind of similarly about Rancho that I do Quattro. I think it's just boring. And I do struggle with my visibility in the drier parts anyways. But I'll play on it. I will keep playing on it. I'm more likely to play it than I am Medved if it is offered to me. Coming up is Mississippi Acres. I'm going to go ahead and rip the band-aid off. I think it is painstakingly obvious. Mississippi was not very well received upon launch. People were excited because they announced the American alligator, and if it wasn't for Mississippi, we wouldn't probably have saltwater croc in Emerald Coast. But unfortunately, I think that's the only appeal to players now with Mississippi. It's just the American alligators. And I mean, the map is convoluted as hell. It is very convoluted, and it is just overran, I fear, with foliage. It's just too lush. There's too much. Unfortunately, a lot of the animals that are out on Mississippi are easier to hunt on other maps. They just are. So really, you only go to Mississippi for alligator. And that really sucks, because there is appeal to Mississippi. It's a pretty map, and alligators. If you want to challenge yourself, you can grind great ones for whitetail deer and black bear on this map. Mississippi is absolutely not a beginner-friendly map. I will tell you that now. I would never recommend Mississippi as a beginner map. That's the fastest way, one of the fastest ways to experience burnout as soon as you start, and frustration, and it's just not worth it. I don't feel like it's worth it to just throw a new player into Mississippi and say, good luck, have fun, this is how you learn. Especially not when maps like Silver Ridge, Verhonga, Layton, and even Yukon exist. A lot of places in Mississippi are very open, I guess, for what it is, despite it being so lush. But a lot of the drinking areas, the water sources on Mississippi are not. And it's a bit annoying and frustrating to have to travel as far as you have to get to some of these zones. Like, sure, you have, like, a giant body of water to the very left side of the map, and you have the river that just cuts through. You know what I mean? You could go hunt that if you want to go walk through miles and miles and miles of just shrubbery and scare off everything within a freaking 260-meter radius. You're also not going to be able to see everything if you do that. You're just not. You're not going to be able to catch everything. You're going to miss out on a lot of zones, and eventually you're going to have to go back and wander through that river or that stretch and look across the river to get all the zones you missed. And I fear that's just a waste. I think that's just a waste. I'm sure I'm echoing a lot of talking points that players had when Mississippi Ridge had just launched, like the foliage being too much, like there's just too much greenery. But I also I think I would agree. There were a lot of players who say that Mississippi Acres was not the best representation of the southern U.S., and I think I would have to agree. It's just unfortunately one of those things that you can tell someone from the U.S. did not design this map, or at least a majority of the design that went into Mississippi Acres was not directed or designed by people who have lived in these areas. Whereas, for example, things like Yukon Valley, Layton Lakes, Silver Ridge Peaks, they were able to capture these landscapes very, very well. Very, very, very well. To the T, almost. And I'll even say ASCII Ridge. I think they nailed that. But I don't think Mississippi was a very good portrayal of the American South. Now that we have that mouthful out of the way, let's talk about Reventuli Coast, bird hunter's paradise, similar to Salsweezen Park, except Salsweezen is a lot smaller and there's no big game. not even mid-sized game on Salzwiesen. Reventuli has so many different bird species. I feel it would be it would be fun for a new player to try Reventuli, but I also think I think they'd get overwhelmed. There's so many birds, and sure, you can hunt moose, whitetail, you can hunt brown bear on that map, you can hunt lynx on that map, you can hunt grouse and quail. No, quail is New England, I'm pretty sure. Capercaillie is what I'm thinking of for Reventuli, but there's lots of waterfowl as well. I'm not much of a bird hunter. I don't have the patience for it. I really don't. I do need to go to Reventuli anyways at some point to get the diamonds I'm missing, but I'm not excited about it. I have spent plenty of time on Reventuli on console, and it's just not one of my favorite places to be. I don't think it's particularly difficult to navigate. I think it's a pretty easy map to walk through. You could use a four-wheeler with very little to no issue. You're definitely not going to get bored on Reventuli. Even when I play it, and I know I don't really like Reventuli, but when I play Reventuli, I don't get bored. There's just too much to do. There's always birds overhead. There's always something around the corner. There's always something at the lake. There's always something to do. There's just so, like, they jam-packed all of these species into one, I would argue, mid-sized map. And I don't hate the size of the map, but I do think that maybe it would be easier to have a couple extra water sources on Reventuli Coast, just to make up for a lot of the waterfowl that are on this map. I think I'm going to put Reventuli in silver. I don't know. I feel better about Reventuli than I feel about Quattro, but I feel better about Rancho than I do about Reventuli. And I dislike Medved and Mississippi a lot more than I dislike all three of those maps in silver. So we might come back to that. I might reconsider that. Up next, we have New England. New England is a lot of fun. I also feel that in New England, there is always something to do, and I feel like the animal variety and the size of the animal populations on that map are not overwhelming. I think the map size is perfect for the animal population size of all of the species on New England. I mean, I feel like, and this might be a hot take, I feel like New England is underrated. New England's not my favorite, but I don't think people appreciate New England enough. I think it is perfectly sized. It is very easy to traverse on foot and four-wheeler. My favorite thing to do is to walk the river, because that river is mostly shallow, and especially in the early morning time when you can see like the black bear, you can see the raccoons drinking. You move on and it's like whitetail, and then the whitetail leave and you get to watch the moose walk in, and it's just a lot of fun. New England really is a lot of fun. Is it my favorite map? No. But it's a good challenge map. I do think New England is better for intermediate players. It's not a very beginner-friendly map. I do see people, like new people joining on a New England server and getting pretty frustrated pretty easily. But then again, I don't know, because I know the rivers themselves are pretty wide open. That, like, it circles the map, right? And then there's like a line that cuts through in two different places, I'm pretty sure, unless I'm misremembering. And that's pretty wide open and shallow and walkable. And you can see all kinds of different things at different times of day. And then as you're walking the river, again, you can see different rest zones and feed zones for coyotes, moose, raccoons, gray fox. New England is a good map. I feel that New England is a good map, but I do think that you're going to need a guide if you're new and want to play on New England. I'll say that. Without a guide, I don't think you'd make it very far. I think we'll put New England in gold. I will also say New England is pretty dense in terms of shrubbery, but it's not overwhelming. There's enough for you to duck and cover in, for sure, but it doesn't overwhelm the water sources there at all. So you have good visibility on the lakes outside of the big stretches of river that is shallow, and you can just see for miles what's coming. Up next, we have Emerald Coast, aptly titled Emerald Trollst by Flinter and Flinter fans. I also think this map was meant to be a test, a very, very big test of your patience. It's not called Emerald Trollst for no reason. People aren't crazy for feeling that way. People get very frustrated when it comes to Emerald Coast because a lot of the animals that spawn as level 5s, level 9s, level 3s, etc. Often do not have the greatest outcome, to put it nicely, for lack of better word. I myself share in these frustrations. I don't know if you guys remember, but I screwed up a max score kangaroo on a multiplayer Emerald Coast server. Not crazy long ago, but a little while ago, and it broke my freaking heart when I found out. When I realized it was a max score, I wanted to curl up and shrivel up and die. I think Emerald Coast would be a pretty decent map for a beginner. I don't think a beginner would have a whole lot of trouble on Emerald Coast without a guide. I think I would be comfortable with that. I also think that Emerald Coast is simple to walk through without a four-wheeler. I don't know if I would take a four-wheeler. I think there are plenty of fast travel locations to help you get back and forth in a timely manner to the point where you don't really feel the need to use a four-wheeler. At least I don't. On the right-hand side of the map, you have this big, wide open coast, Emerald Coast, where saltwater crocodile just lay out in the sun from dawn to dusk, which makes, 1, money grinding very easy, 2, grinding out crocs for diamonds very easy, 3, finding your drink zones for species like banteng and red fox a lot easier as well. The animal variety on this map provides a challenge, but it's not the most difficult map to play on in the world. Even with kangaroo, even with mountain goat, even with boar or feral pig, I can't remember which one it is, even with fallow deer, hog deer, rooster deer, the crocodiles, the banteng, the red fox, all of these species. I do not think Emerald Coast is a difficult map. I think what is difficult is your feelings getting hurt when the animal you shoot doesn't score diamond. I don't know what it is about Emerald Coast and diamonds, but you will be trolled to hell and back before you reap the benefits of your hard work. And I can see where that can cause a lot of frustration, and I can also see where that may cause a lot of burnout for players that get into Emerald Coast and get so far only just to be like 2 steps behind the entire time. I get that. Emerald Coast is also very, 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 very good. I would even say it's the map for grinding out red fox great ones. Aside from Salsweez Park, I think those two are the best maps for grinding out great ones for those species. I don't think that a beginner player's first great one should be a red fox. I just point blank, I don't think it'd be fun for a new player. I don't think it'd be wise or best for a new player. So I couldn't recommend Great One grinding on this map to a new player, but I could see a new player, learning where to go, learning, the mechanics, getting started, building their foundation on Emerald Coast. Overall, I really enjoy this map. I think I'm going to put Emerald Coast in, I want to say Diamond, but I don't know, because I don't enjoy Emerald Coast nearly as much as I enjoy Layton, Silver Ridge, or Verhonga, and definitely not as much as Yukon Valley. But I do like it more than Hirschfelden, and I like it more than Te Awaroa. I do like it more than Parque Fernando. Do I like it more than New England? I think out of fairness, I will put it next to New England in gold. Now, next is Sunder Patan. Boy, let me freaking go ahead and just rip that band-aid off. Sunder Patan is go-ted. Sunder Patan is goated. When Sunder Patan was announced, that was the map that made me want to start covering new Call of the Wild DLC and map updates. I was so excited for Sunder Patan. Even in the moments building up to its, announcement trailer, I was on the edge of my seat hoping and praying. And I thought we were going to be getting an Indian map, a map out in India. But when they announced, the Bengal Tiger, they announced the Barasinga, the Nilgai, the Snow Leopard, even. I was floored. And not to mention, I will say, I was so impressed with the models of the animals on this map. I was so impressed by how much they stepped it up in terms of modeling and design, especially in the animals, but even more so in the landscape overall. I think they encompassed Nepal very well. I think the map design is genius. Usually I like a very fair and even, valleys to mountains or hills ratio. I like a lot of high highs, but I like my low lows, and I like for my maps to be pretty even. That way I don't feel like I'm constantly fighting to get to where I need to be, and I'm not taking all of this time trying to get from A to B on foot or with a four-wheeler. And that's the cool thing about Sunder Patan. I feel like you could do both at pretty much any part of the map, and Sunder Patan is very mountainous. The lower part of the map is the valley, and then it just goes up from there. So, I love the challenge part of this map, especially with the additions of Bengal Tiger being as rare as they are, and then Snow Leopard being even rarer than Bengal Tiger, and both of them being on the same map. That dichotomy is so cool to me. Sunder Patan, I fear, is not a beginner-friendly map. I would not put a beginner on this map without a guide. And in fact, I don't even think I would put a player on Thunder Baton if they're not at least level 20 and have enough experience with this map. This was one of the harder maps to play. It's kind of similar to Mississippi being one of the more difficult maps to play, but the difference is Mississippi is difficult because of bad design. Thunder Baton is difficult because there's actual challenge being provided to the player by playing the map. You have two of the game's most elusive animals in one map. And you have to get diamonds of them. Or you don't have to, but you'll want to. Not to mention with the added difficulty of the Bengal tigers hunting you back. That is nuts. When that mechanic was teased and dropped, players went nuts over that. Rightfully so. It's genius. I love the way they've modeled and designed the AI for the Bengal tigers. I will still harp on that to this day. I will be Thunder Baton's biggest dick rider until the day I die. I will say, however, a lot of the water sources in the upper mountainy or hilly regions, in the higher elevations, they're open to a certain degree, but because of the changes in elevation in different parts of those water sources, it's not difficult. Really, it's not hard, but it's not simple either to hunt those water sources up there. But like in the valley, where that long river is and those little lakes at the bottom there, and even the little lakes like right above the river on the lower half of the map, they're pretty decently wide open. There's foliage for you to duck and cover in that doesn't overwhelm the water source, so you don't have to worry about scaring off your animal if you're already in place. And even if you're moving through the weeds and the shrubbery, you're not going to be close enough to the animal on the water to scare it off, which is very useful, especially, like I said, with Bengal tigers. Now that we have that mouthful out of the way, let's go on to Salsweezen Park, yet again another bird hunter's paradise. There is no big game on this map at all. I don't think there's an animal on this map that surpasses level 3. I don't even think there's an animal on this map that surpasses level 2. You've got your raccoon dogs, your raccoon, and your red fox, and then the rest are birds, and of course birds are all class 1, even the geese, the bigger birds. I'm not a bird hunter, and you know this. I've said it here today, but if you are a longtime viewer of my channel, you'll know I'm not a bird hunter. I don't have the patience for it. I don't have the eyes for it. But I do have a lot of fun. I've spent a lot of time on Salsweezen Park. A lot of time. I've already got my diamond ferruginous duck, diamond gadwall. I think I got my diamond greylag on this map as well. Salsweezen is a brilliant map for great one grinding for pheasant and fox, especially. One of the game's hardest diamonds to achieve, raccoon dog, can be found on this map pretty easily. If a new player joined today, for example, if a new player started playing today and they asked me, hey, what map would you recommend for me to start on? I'm not really a big game hunter or a mid-game hunter. I prefer bird hunting. I prefer, shotguns and 22s. I prefer birds. Where would you recommend me to start? I would send them Salsweezen Park. I think Salsweezen makes it very, very, very easy to bird hunt. Absolutely. And that's without a guide. That's without a guide. I would send a new person to Salsweezen Park without a guide if bird hunting was what they most preferred to do, because they already have a general idea of what it's going to be like. It's all a matter of learning the mechanics and getting your foundation, gaining your footing so that you can get better at the game, especially if you like to bird hunt, because it is a more difficult part of the game to master. However, it's not really one of my favorite maps in the world. I don't hate it. I have had a lot of fun on it. It's just difficult for me to get into bird hunting. I don't know where I'd put it, though, because I don't know if I can base a ranking on Salsweezen Park based on just that. I think I'm just going to have to rip off the Band-Aid on this one, too. I'm sorry. No, not bronze. Not bronze. It's definitely going to have to go in silver. I just don't have the patience for bird hunting, and again, Salsweezen makes it very, very easy, but it's just not me. It's not me, I'm sorry. Last but not least, ASCII Ridge, and I think it's as obvious as the nose on my face where this sucker's going. We're sticking that right up in diamond. This is another contender for Great One. ASCII Ridge has become a very close second favorite map of mine, other than Yukon Valley. I could never replace Yukon Valley. That map is cemented in my heart permanently until the day I'm laid to rest, but ASCII Ridge cuts it very, very close. I love what they've done with ASCII Ridge. Going back to Thunder Baton, that was the pivotal moment where I noticed they were really upping their game in terms of animal design and map design. I think that was like the turning point that told us as a player base, hey, we're getting really serious about this. And they really clocked it into overdrive when it came to map design, and they really clocked it in overdrive, especially on the animals. And so when they announced they were remodeling some pre-existing animals for the launch of ASCII Ridge, everyone was a little apprehensive, I feel. I was excited, but I get why people would feel apprehensive. Because they're not used to high quality right then and there, unfortunately, when it comes to, like, Expansive Worlds and Avalanche Studios. I'm not saying that it's not high quality. I think that was a bad word to use. They just were not... I don't think us as a player base are used to receiving such accurate models on launch. You know what I mean? That's why they had to go back and remodel some animals, because they definitely showed their age. They're products of their time. And now they have artists and designers and, you know, modelers. I don't know what you'd call that. But they have people in place with the skill sets to take the immersion of this game to the next level. And Sunder Patan really showcased that. And with the launch of ASCII Ridge and the remodel of these animals, they could not have done a better job. The pronghorn are amazing. The mule deer are gorgeous. The bighorn look fantastic. Much more realistic than they did. Their horns used to curl right in front of their eyes so they couldn't see in their old models. And now they look so much more realistic and so much more detailed. Like, you can see every dent, every line, every scratch. You can see every little lifelike detail in the horns of those bighorn sheep especially. And I mean, I'll say it, I've said it before, I'll do it again, the gray wolves, man, they outdid themselves on the gray wolves. Now, if they would go back and touch up on the Iberian wolves, I would be a little more appreciative, and go back and touch up on that lion, those mangy-ass lions over in Verhonga. They need some love, some tender care even. But I mean, seriously, those gray wolves look amazing, absolutely amazing. And I think they touched up on the pre-existing caribou and reindeer as well, not just to differentiate them from, like, Grant caribou, woodland caribou, reindeer, you know, I'm not talking about names. They touched up on their models too, I'm pretty sure. ASCII Ridge can be a little tricky to navigate at some points because it is very icy, it's very hilly, but it's not impossible. And it is, I think, easier even to traverse the map on four-wheeler to get around. Don't get me wrong, there's lots of different, like, fast travel points around a lot of the different water sources that are wide open and accessible even on foot, mind you. But I think a lot of the more mountainous and hilly regions of ASCII Ridge are better accessed on four-wheeler, and the map makes it very easy to do so. With the announcement of beavers as well on ASCII Ridge, they've included areas along the river on that map where the dams are. That way, of course, you can find beavers during their appropriate gathering zones or rest zones, feed zones, what have you. But even in doing so, they've not made it difficult to find the drink zones of the other animals on ASCII Ridge around those parts of the river. You'd think that because of the way that the dam areas are designed, it'd be tricky, it'd be difficult. But no, there's no huge shifts or huge changes in elevation around those zones, the same way that it is on Rancho del Arroyo, for example. It's all mostly flat around those areas because it's a river, sure, but even the lakes, even getting to the lakes is easy. Like, seeing everything, like, across these frozen lakes, frozen or not, seeing everything across the lake, seeing your targets, it's so much easier. It is so easy. Even during the nighttime, I hate to night hunt. ASCII Ridge, similarly to Yukon, makes it very, very easy to night hunt because those water sources are just so wide open, while still having enough foliage, enough cover for you to hide in so you don't scare anything. The map is not overwhelmed with shrubbery and foliage either. I think it is perfect. I think they really nailed this map design. And, of course, I've done harped on the animals, but I'll do it again. The animal design in this game is so immersive and lifelike and real. I think that ASCII Ridge, like, they nailed it. This is their big one, and I think that it will be a favorite map in the hearts of new players and old players for a very, very, very long time. I think it'll be very hard to top what they've done with ASCII Ridge with anything else, which, by the way, we're slated for another map release this December, so keep your eyes peeled for that. I don't have any information about it yet. Just remember, there's another map coming. Alright, everyone, this is my tier list. I want to, again, mention these are just my preferences. These are just my opinions. It's not the end-all, be-all, and I would love to hear your preferences and your opinions in the comments below. Let's talk, let's discuss, let's debate, and maybe it's constructive enough to reach the eyes and ears of the developers over at Expansive World and Avalanche Studios. Maybe we can create the change we want to see, you know what I mean? Anyway, all that aside, in the Great Ones section, it is Yukon Valley, the one and only, the Don Julio of reserves. I would only replace this with Silver Ridge Peaks or ASCII Ridge, depending on very specific factors. Maybe even Virhonga. In the Diamond section, we have Virhonga, Layton, Silver Ridge, Sunderpatan, and ASCII Ridge. In Gold, we have Hirschfelden, Parque Fernando, Te Aroa, New England, and Emerald Coast. In Silver, we have Cuatro Colinas, Rancho del Arroyo, Reventuli Coast, and Salsweezen Park. And in Bronze, we have the Medved Taiga and the Mississippi Acres. I know I said this wasn't going to be super long, and I hoped it wouldn't be super long, but I love to yap, and I love to share my opinions, and I love to discuss things that could eventually, maybe, perhaps, cause some change in the game that we as a player base would like to see. So, yet again, feel free to, duke it out in the comments section or whatever. Let me hear from you. What are your favorite maps? What are your least favorite maps? What are your favorite parts of the game? What are your least favorite parts of the game? If you do a tier list, I would love to see it. Post it in the Hunter's official Discord server. I'm bound to see it. Feel free to tag me even. The link for this tier list is down below in the description yet again for anyone who wants to make one for themselves. And there's lots of other Call of the Wild related tier lists on this website, including weapons, including animals from like A to Z, all 102 of them. I think they haven't updated it for ASCII Ridge just yet, but I could foresee that happening at some point. Anywho, all of that to say, thank you so much for watching. If you're a new viewer here, it was great to meet you, and if you're a returning viewer, it was great to see you again. Thanks for listening to me yap, and I can't wait to hear from you in the comments. And with that, roll the tape, and I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for watching my video. If you'd like to watch more, you can select one of the icons to the right of me, or you can select the little icon down below to subscribe. If you like what you've seen today, leave a like, subscribe if you want, ring the dinner bell for notifications next time I go live, or next time there's a new upload, or you can select one of the links down below in the description to follow me across all of your favorite social media platforms. I do have an Insta Lodge, which you can find down below. Any harvest screenshots or photography that I take while I play Call of the Wild gets posted there first. I have a Twitch where I do stream Call of the Wild from time to time. We have an absolute blast, and we would love to have you. Or you can go to my TikTok, where any additional Call of the Wild content goes that doesn't quite make it into my YouTube channel. Thanks again for stopping by. It was good to see you, and I hope to see you next time. Have a good one.